Welcome to the Rewilded Human podcast, where Dr. Lucille, holistic psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and Dr. Lynn, naturopath and nutritional consultant, help you reconnect with your true self through practical tips on mental health, nutrition, exercise, relationships, and spirituality. With a dash of humor, they tackle today's toughest issues to guide you back to a harmonious, vibrant life. Rediscover your natural self, just as nature intended. In today's episode,
the hippocampus is the part of the brain that deals with memory and emotion. And we also have verbal centers, more verbal centers in our brain. So our brains are more geared to communication. So memory, emotion, communication, which is wonderful to make us good processors of everybody's emotions, our emotions, everybody's emotions. We're processing everything, all the emotional temperatures in the room, right? There's another part of the brain that I find is overactive in women. It's called anterior cingulate gyrus. It's part of the brain that is an error detector, and it is scanning the environment for what could be going wrong. Women tend to be more prone to depression and anxiety. Part of it is because biologically we tend to process serotonin, the neurotransmitter serotonin, a little bit differently from men. But I think it's also because under stress, our brains go haywire with all this overthinking and focus on the negative. And it's very, very hard to get off that hamster wheel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 59 of the Rewilded Human podcast. I'm Lynn Hardy. I'm a nutritional consultant and a naturopath, and I have my beautiful and ever so wise co-host, Dr. Lucille, who's a psychiatrist, a holistic psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and a very spiritual, amazing lady with so much insight to share with you guys. So we are really excited about this episode. This was inspired by, kind of a post of mine on Instagram that went viral. I think it has like 3 million views by now, and it's still going strong. And it kind of was like a little bit like a joke. I'm going to read you the text of this. It's kind of like a meme. It's just a short reel. So basically the text that I put on this was, women spend more time thinking about what men are thinking than men spend thinking. So let me read that again. Women spend more time thinking about what men are thinking than men spend thinking. So this episode is going to be about why men and women actually think so differently. Now, first of all, I got a lot of hate on this post. People are saying I should be reported and everything, even though I put a long description saying this is nothing negative against men. I love men. I have a beautiful son, husband. I am not a feminist. I'm not a sexist. So all the hate that was coming at me was not justified. We brought up this situation, and I said to Dr. Lucille, I said, let's discuss this in an episode, because men and women do think differently. And my thought process behind this was that women overthink everything, right? So when we're thinking about what men are thinking, men are actually lucky because they don't overthink things so much. They think about the practical things, what needs to be done. They get it done. They're not, churning all these things in their mind constantly, but oh my God, but what's the wife thinking? Am I right, Lucille? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely correct. You are so correct. So this isn't about who's right, who's wrong, but let's just look at the reality of how we think differently.
And why our brains work so differently.
That's right, yes.
Between the sexes, right? Because we're not even allowed to say that men and women have different brains and that we process things differently and we analyze things differently.
Yeah, but there is a lot of neurological evidence out there that they have shown that the two brains are different. Now, they will tell us how the brains are different, but every respectable researcher will also remind us that within the entire group of men, there is far more difference than between men and women. So within the group of women, there's also far more difference in the group than there is between women and men. So we overlap quite a bit.
Yes.
All right. And so you have to steer clear of the stereotypes, but also be aware, we do need to know, how our nearest and dearest process the world, how they go through the world, how they see themselves and others, so that we can develop the best possible relationships, right?
Absolutely.
We cannot just assume that, the men are going to see it the way we do, and men cannot assume that women should just think more like men. We have to accommodate.
And I mean, that's why those books, men are from women are from Venus, men are from Mars, right? That's why those books were so popular, because it's exactly what it discussed, like the differences between the male brain and the female brain, and how we process information, emotions, and everything else.
Exactly. This is more just about getting to understand one another. It's not about, male bashing. Absolutely not.
I'm going to read you guys some of the comments, because some of them are quite interesting. We got quite a few from guys. This is I'm going to start with my favorite one. This is from Scott. So got a call from the wife asking me what I'm thinking about. I told her I'm thinking about why she called and asked that question. She said, not that, what were you thinking before I called? I said, nothing. She said, that's impossible. So now my answer is always, you, honey, gotta make that you can't make that shit up. So at least he's learning. Scott is learning, right? But why are we obsessed with asking our men what they're thinking? Why do we need to know what they're thinking?
This is how women are wired for the most part, right? Okay. So, one of the things is that we have a bigger hippocampus than men. Okay. And the hippocampus is the part of the brain that deals with memory and emotion. And we also have more verbal centers in our brain. So our brains are more geared to communication. So memory, emotion, communication, which is wonderful to make us good processors of everybody's emotions, our emotions, everybody's emotions. We're processing everything, all the emotional temperatures in the room, right? And we are good at empathy, because we're so emotionally tuned in, which is beautiful. And we're also more verbally inclined. We want to communicate, and we're better actually generally in verbal communication than men. And the other thing about our brains that's really important to note is that we have far more interconnectivity of all the different parts of the brain. Okay. So it's not just, oh, gee, what should we have for dinner? It's now that part of the brain that's thinking about that is now connecting to the last time that you made dinner for your husband and he didn't praise you to the skies. So that means you can't have the same thing again, but you're still bothered by, why he didn't look so overjoyed at that meal. And he's never explained, his comment that it's fine. But then he just didn't look like it was fine. And then that reminds me that, wow, that also happened 10 years ago.
Yeah. And plus I have a chicken in the fridge that's going to go bad that needs to be cooked, right? And I got to pick the kids up from school. And I did a video about this. Like we literally have like 100 tabs open. It's like on your computer and all of this stuff is going on at once. And I think that's why we need like 2 hours more sleep than men, because
sure, absolutely, because our brains are processing so much more. So, our brains are working overtime to figure out what's going on. And there's another part of the brain that I find is overactive in women. It's called, people don't have to know this, anterior cingulate gyrus. It's part of the brain that is an error detector, and it is scanning the environment for what could be going wrong.
Is that like a BS meter?
Yeah. It is, but also for any signs of danger, for any signs that somebody is unhappy, it's over-focused on what's not going right. Whereas men will be, what's the big deal? Yeah. Everything's fine. Yeah. I don't see why you're worried, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, with the men, it is easier. And, I kind of envy men in many ways for this.
Me too. This was not bashing them. I envy them. I want a brain like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So. One of the things is that they have a verbal center in only one part of their brain. So the verbal centers are not, in different areas. So they only have it in the left hemisphere. They also do have a part of the brain that's really good at math, estimating speed and time and things like that. Which
Directions.
is great. Yeah. And they, and that makes sense. The whole thing makes sense from an evolutionary point of view, because traditionally men have been the warriors, the hunters, the protectors. They
Yes.
have to keep it simple so that they can spring into action the moment that their brain has processed there's a danger.
Yes.
They do not need to be analyzing them, the million
Yeah.
times that the partner didn't look at them in the right way, So that makes their lives very simple, and that's why they do not get this over analysis that women do. Their brains are much more focused on it's called a sort of a front to back kind of connections. Like most of the connections throughout their brain are going like front to back to front, which means that they're much more focused on visuals, task-based projects, anything that involves action, which fits beautifully with their traditional role. Women are much better because their brains are so multi-connected. They're much better at multitasking, at language, at interpreting emotions. Truthfully, women's brains are actually more evenly balanced in their functioning.
Yeah.
If they don't get too caught up in the negative, okay,
Absolutely.
in the over processing of the negative. The downside, though, is women tend to be more prone to depression and anxiety. Part of it is because biologically we tend to process serotonin, the neurotransmitter serotonin, a little bit differently from men.
Yeah.
But I think it's also because under stress, our brains go haywire with all this overthinking and focus on the negative. And it's very, very hard to get off that hamster wheel. Men are really great at, they want to get to the bottom of the problem and fix it. Just fix it. Okay. Drives women crazy because what they want is someone to listen to all their mental meanderings, all their emotional reactions.
Analyze everything with them.
Analyze everything to the millionth degree. They don't want a solution. Thank you very much. Women just want to be listened to. And maybe asked a question that helps them to, meander a little bit more.
That's why we need girlfriends.
That's exactly right. You don't bring your problems to your spouse.
That's definitely. Let's look at some of the other comments, especially from men, what they have to say. One man says, sex, sports, food, and career, not necessarily in that order. So he says this is what they're thinking about. and probably accurate. I don't know. Somebody else says a brain analyzing nonstop, as you say, sounds like a brain having function issues. You are your own master. Just imagine nothing. It's dark or light, then nothing else. If ask you why this spruce, this nothing makes you feel uncomfortable, you'll probably find some deeply buried fears. Now that has me a little bit confused, but I wish it was that easy that you just imagine nothing and then you have nothing. I mean, a female brain doesn't work like that.
And it doesn't, it's unfortunate because this gentleman does not understand the historic traditional role of women, which is to take care of others, child rearing.
Exactly.
You don't rear children very well if you're not attuned to them emotionally.
Exactly.
And you have to understand which one of your baby's cries means it needs to be fed or it needs to have its diaper changed. So you're analyzing all the time as a woman.
Yeah.
And you're multitasking all the time, right?
But it's part of our survival skill. I mean, it's also very important.
What kept our tribes going.
Exactly.
So it's more like, well, why don't we just understand and celebrate the differences rather than just say, well, you should just all be like me.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think this post triggered people so much? It really made people angry.
This is an age where, shall we go back to our previous episode, where we're more narcissistic as a general population, right? People don't regulate their emotions very well. People have experienced lots of trauma that's unresolved. They're needing a target for their their frustrations, their stresses, their rage about how their lives didn't turn out the way they wanted. And so it's very easy to target a post on Instagram or wherever. And
this comes from both men and women. So it's not,
and women.
and you know, it's kind of both sexes are like that. They're just waiting to attack you. One guy was, I don't know if he actually reported me, but he's calling me sexist, and he's saying everyone needs to report this post. I mean, first of all, it's like a tongue-in-cheek post. It's a kind of a joke.
Yeah,
Not really, but you know.
That's a real sign of the decline in our general level of mental health, that we no longer have a sense of humor.
Yeah,
right.
Which is really sad, isn't it? I think that's the saddest thing. Is there a big difference when it comes to sense of humor between men and women?
I haven't seen any research on it, but if anybody out there listening to this knows of any, I'd love to get the citation for it. Both men and women. I mean, if you've seen male comics and female comics, they're both equally adept at humor, right? Yeah. It's just that the subject matter is different, right? Yeah. The women will laugh about all the peculiarities of, life as women, menopause and all of that stuff. And men will talk about, sex and sports and,
and make fun of women. and make fun of women.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's quite funny. Here's another one. Men think about important stuff like solving problems. Women worry about stuff that hasn't happened and likely never will happen. I think this is also true. I don't think he's wrong that they do. The men compartmentalize. I can't say that word. What is it?
Compartmentalize. Yeah.
That's their issues more so, and then really tend to focus on the one thing that they're doing. Like if my husband is making himself breakfast, I can't talk to him. He's frying eggs. I mean, how can he pay attention to what I'm saying when he's frying his eggs? He's focused. He's on the task. That's it, right? Whereas we're frying eggs, we're on the phone, we're leaving a message, we're doing a million things at once. So, and we do this. Why do women's brains always think about the worst that can happen and worry about stuff that hasn't happened, that will not happen? We do worry about that a lot more, because I saw that like with our son, every time he stepped out of the door, I had a million things going in my mind as to what's going to happen to him. But my husband never had that thought ever. And I could never understand that. Like, aren't you worried about him? Aren't you scared? Don't you love him? But they just, like, I can't even imagine having that peaceful of a brain where my kid can just go out the door and I don't worry.
Yes, but here is an example of a somewhat dysregulated nervous system, okay? Not that I'm saying that yours...
My part or his part?
Well, your husband is perhaps at the other extreme. Let's put it that way. But I think when women get overly anxious, that's because their brain is primed again for looking for the worst case scenario, trying to detect anything going wrong. And if you don't regulate your nervous system, for example, if you like you just justified, I'm gonna pick you as an example. I hope you don't get offended.
Oh, not at all. That's what I'm here for, Lucille. Pick away.
But if you cannot recognize that maybe my reaction is out of proportion, then you're not going to do anything to regulate your nervous system, which means that you're going to keep having this catastrophic reaction every time your son leaves, right?
Yes,
but if you say to yourself, okay, realistically, there are dangers out there. But the thing is, I've tried to prepare my son as best I can. He knows how to get a hold of us and all of that, whatever. And now it's really about me blowing my fuses when I don't need to. And maybe I just need to go to a yoga class or a meditation or do some journaling or whatever, and stop and distract myself.
Yeah.
Distraction is another way to regulate your nervous system. And I think women allow themselves they just get hijacked by the particular worry or fear. And then they don't usually do anything to pull back and regulate themselves. And the unfortunate thing that also makes this hard is that women like nothing better than to go call their friend and talk about how bad they're feeling. right? How much anxiety. Oh my God,
I had the worst day. You
the
can't
worst
imagine.
day. Oh my goodness. So that gives a woman the incentive to just stay in the anxiety and the catastrophizing, because she's getting a bit of a reward, a little dopamine rush whenever a friend sympathizes.
Is this like a bonding ritual?
It's a bonding thing. Yes, it
Yeah,
is. I think that's the unhealthy part of this, that, you know, it really should be more about, I don't want to get into a relationship with somebody who's enabling me to stay worried and anxious.
Yeah.
I think I need to stabilize my nervous system instead. That would be the healthier response.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, Lucille. Do you find that a lot of men, because now testosterone levels are at all-time low, right? They're saying that the average 20-year-old today has the testosterone of what a 70-year-old had in 2020. I mean, that's
Right.
insane if you think about that. And, you know, their estrogen is much higher than it should be because of all the chemicals and everything in our environment, our food, everything. Do you find that men are also changing emotionally? Like, do you see more emotional men, more outbursts, more that their brains are also changing?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to say, because I do see some men, but I don't see a large enough population to be able to track it over time. The majority of my clients are female. Yeah, but it is a very difficult situation when the man behaves more like a woman. And again, I'm sorry to be stereotypical like this, but if a man is, quote unquote, not in his true masculinity, if you're not in that take charge, let's get to the bottom of the problem, let's solve it, that sort of thing. And he's
more beta.
He's hijacked, but he's beta, and he's hijacked by all of his emotions. That creates huge strain in relationships, because what then happens is the woman has to step in and be the masculine one. And women can do that because we're so good at doing whatever is necessary in a situation to try to make it better. You know, we go to work, we are bosses, we are project managers and all of that stuff. But it is hard on our nervous system if that's all we're doing all the time. You know, women feel better when they can relax a little bit more and allow a male who's masculine enough to take over when you know they're both at home at the end of the day. It's not a happy resolution to just say, oh well, if we were all unisex it would be wonderful. No.
It is yin and yang. You need the balance. You know, I've got a real alpha husband. And I love the fact that if something goes wrong or if someone were to break into the house, you know, he's not going to throw me in front of himself to protect himself, like we've seen in some situations where they threw the kid in. Remember, there was like a bike coming into the audience and the father was hiding behind his child. So I don't have a husband like that, you know, like he's a real alpha and I know he'd protect his family, he'd die for his family. And I like that feeling, you know, then I can step into my feminine power because he's got that part covered. I don't want to be the protector. I mean, of course, I'm protecting my family as well, but he's physically protecting, or if something is broken in the house, he goes and fixes it, or, you know, like I like that feeling. That to me is important for a woman. But I'm seeing a lot of men, even in relationships around me with friends and stuff like that, that the men are not like that anymore. That it's the woman who is stronger and the woman has to go and protect and make the decisions and you know, step up and fix problems and all this stuff. And then when you have this mismatch in the relationship, I think it becomes really difficult because the woman is no longer attracted to the man because he's not, you know, he's not an alpha. And he's not attracted to her sexually because she's too masculine. So I think because our roles are getting reversed, I think maybe this is a conversation for another episode as well. But, you know, it's what we're talking about, our brains and how they're different, but how things are getting messed up with all the chemicals in our environment.
Even the traditional ways of expressing masculinity and femininity are getting blurred. And that's unfortunate. It really, really is, I think. I
Yeah.
agree with you for all of the reasons that you've just said. I do not agree that the answer to all of this is that we all become unisex. It's
No.
just not going to make anything better. And I'm also a proponent of, maybe rather than insisting that the opposite sex be more like our sex, that we just celebrate the differences and respect them and work with them,
Absolutely. And I think it's the women that are more guilty of this, because the men just kind of let us be. They're not expecting us to be more like them. But women, we want our husbands to be our best friend, our sister,
Yes,
our,
that's
our
right.
soulmate,
Yeah.
everything. And I think
Yeah.
I've done a video about this as well, but that one person cannot be your everything. It's
That's
impossible.
right.
So this is why we
That's
have girlfriends that we can go and chit chat with for hours about all kinds of silly stuff and stuff that our husbands just don't care about. Like, we don't need to force these things on our husband
Absolutely.
and have these long emotional talks that they dread and they hate. And
Yeah.
and we should have different, it takes a village, right? So we should have a
Yeah.
village. We should have a beautiful supporting environment and people around us who can meet those needs that perhaps our partners cannot.
Exactly.
And that's
I
okay.
totally agree. And that's totally okay. Having said that, I love women, but I would love them to be maybe sometimes a little bit more like men in terms of their thinking.
In what respect, Lucille?
When they're coming to their therapist.
And in what way?
The focus on getting somebody to listen to them and pay attention and soothe them is not a formula for change.
Yeah.
So for example, women can come, and they can come under somewhat false pretenses to therapy. And what they want is that loving, soothing, listening presence that's just going to reassure them and take care of them and let them ramble on forever.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I also have had women in my clientele who are very, very verbose. They tend to talk a lot and go into a lot of detail, but they are still focused on making some change.
Yeah.
And they will do whatever they need to regulate their nervous system. So I'm not talking about everybody whose brain wanders the way a lot of women's brains do. But the thing is that sometimes we need to be able to be flexible and to adapt to the situation. So adapting to our partners who aren't in that state of, let me just meander and share my thoughts. They aren't in that.
Yeah.
To know that, to be very conscious of that and not inflict it on our partners.
Yeah.
As you said, you're very right. You take that to your girlfriends.
Yes.
And if there's business to be done and there truly is some problem that needs to be solved, that we need to kind of tighten up our focus and go for the root cause of whatever's the problem and do try to fix it. It's not about one is better than the other. It's about, again, learning how we are different, learning how we need to adapt, and be open to adapting when the situation calls for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And not just blaming the other, gender for not thinking the way we do. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully this episode will help people gain a better understanding as to how we are different and why we are different, and to celebrate our differences and not make a big issue out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's hope we don't get deplatformed. Maybe a whole bunch of people will report us.
Yeah, they'll report this. Oh my God, these sexist people, they said men and women have different brains. How dare you? Oh my God. Or, alpha males, can't talk about alpha males anymore, right? I mean,
yes. So anyway, thank you very much, those of you who have listened to this episode. We are very grateful for you. We would love to get your comments, feedback. Hopefully you'll share this out to people who you think may want to hear it, and you'll leave us a review, an honest review. We would Totally appreciate that. So with that said, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Lynn, for your insights and your sharing of your personal experiences. We will see you all in the next episode. Bye,
See you
everyone.
guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Rewilded Human podcast. We hope you're leaving with insights to reconnect with your natural, vibrant self. Remember, the information shared here is for educational and inspirational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for any personal health concerns. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit. We'll see you next time, ready to dive even deeper. Stay wild, stay true, and stay tuned.